Good evening. Welcome to the Development Management Committee. I'm Councillor Kieran Bowker, the Chair of the committee. Before we start the meeting, I need to make the public attending aware of the following. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm goes off, please make your way out of the nearest emergency exit and gather at the front of Runnymede Hall. Meetings of the committee are webcast and broadcast on the internet. If you're seated in the public gallery of the council chamber, it's possible that your image will become part of the broadcast. And lastly, may I ask all present to switch mobile phones to silent. May I ask the Development Management Committee members present who are seated in the chamber in the front row to introduce themselves, stating your name only, starting on my left.
Good evening, my name is Councillor Peter Gregg, Vice Chairman of this committee.
Good evening, Councillor Alan Acott.
Good evening, Councillor Carol Sage.
Good evening, John Anderson, Councillor.
Good evening all, Councillor Rob Lillis.
Good evening, Councillor Gareth Howlett.
Good evening all, Councillor Russ Savage.
Councillor Jackie Thornton.
Councillor Andrew Thornton representing Councillor Skip.
May I ask the officers present to introduce themselves, again starting on my left. Present to introduce themselves, again starting on my left.
Thank you. Stephen Garner, the Assistant Director for Development Services.
Anne Horgan, I'm the Head of Governance, but I'm the Committee Officer this evening.
Good evening, David Bland, Legal Advisor to the Committee.
May I ask any other members present to introduce themselves?
Councillor John Knott, Victoria Ward.
Councillor Benjamin Bazell, Appleton Ward.
Councillor Warren Gibson, Victoria Ward.
Councillor Nicola Benson, St George's Ward.
Councillor Diana Jones, St Mary's Ward.
Councillor Sharon Ainsley, St Mary's Ward.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda, item 1 is apologies. Are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chairman, as you've heard, Councillor Tom Skip has given apologies for absence and Councillor Andrew Thornton is substituting.
Thank you. Item 2 is members' interests. Are there any members' interests? Item 3 is minutes. The minutes for the Development Management Committee held last week and this meeting will be presented to our next scheduled meeting on the 9th of January 2024. Item 4 is public speakers.
Yes, Chairman, we have Mr Mike Carpenter, a supporter in item 5.1, and Councillor John Knott, the Victoria Ward member, has also given notice of his wish to speak.
Thank you, ma'am. Item 5 is deposited plans. Before we move on to considering the applications this evening, I need to make everyone aware of the following. I agreed to take item 2 regarding Benfleet service station as an item of urgent business. This item was deferred last week for further information, which was made available very quickly and to avoid an appeal for non-determination. As this is a continuation of the consideration of the item deferred for a second time from the 3rd of October, only those members of the committee who were present on this evening are present this evening, and those that were present on the 3rd of October can take part in the debate and vote on those items. To clarify, the following members were present on the 3rd of October. Councillors Bowker, Acott, Anderson, Lillis, Mountford, Carol Sage, Savage, Skip and Jackie Thornton. The following members gave apologies on the 3rd of October and will not be able to participate in the debate or vote on the item. That's to say Councillor Gregg, Councillor Barton-Brown and Councillor Howlett. Finally, members, picking up from the very useful training session last week, may I remind you that we are considering the applications on the agenda papers before us this evening and nothing else. No late information presented from investigations on the internet during the meeting, please. Thank you. Item 1 is land east of Rayleigh Road, Thundersley, Victoria Ward. I'll now hand over to the Planning Officer to present this item.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to start this evening by saying that unfortunately the case officer for this application, Terry Garner, is unable to be here and present this application because he's unwell, so hopefully he has a speedy recovery. This major application is being presented to the Development Management Committee this evening because it is considered to be of a sufficient scale to warrant full consideration by members of the committee. An important point to note this evening, which I want to pull out, is that this is an outline planning application only, and so the only aspects that are sought for approval are the principle of the development as well as the access. All other matters such as appearance, landscaping, layout and scale would form reserved matters application to be determined at a later stage and would be under a separate application. I trust all of you have read the report this evening. I appreciate it is quite a lengthy one, so apologies for that. However, there's a lot to cover. However, I won't go through it all this evening, but we'll try and highlight the key points to consider. Turning to the application site itself, it is some almost 28 hectares in size, located to the east of Rayleigh Road, which runs down here, and to the north of Dawes Heath Road along the bottom. To the north of the site up here, you've got the Rayleigh Weir Industrial and Retail Park, whilst to the east of the site, you've got the Little Havens Hospice here, and more widely, the Little Havens Nature Reserve. And the land is allocated within the adopted local plan as Greenbelt. The application site itself comprises a number of small historic fields with historic field and ditch boundaries dating back to potentially the medieval times. So you can see these here on this aerial imagery. And it forms part of an important wildlife corridor within the suburban area. There's also a small fishing lake over here, which some of the members met with me on Monday by, which is the Oak Lodge Fishery, which has a small clubhouse located about here, and is accessed via a sort of a dirt track leading up the side here. You've also got on the site, you've got the existing Claydon's farm located here, which is the actual dwelling building itself is excluded from the application site. Taking a look at the wider area, you've got Thundersley Great Common, Triple SI, over to this side of the site. You've got Greatwood and Dodswood, which actually, if I zoom out a little bit more, you've got Greatwood and Dodswood over here. And you've also got the Garrald's Meadow Triple SI over here as well. You've also got another number of other woodlands and areas of open space, such as Westwood, Poundwood, and Valerie Wells Wood here. The site forms part of a corridor of sort of green belt and green area that's about 450 to 500 metres wide, separating Thundersley from Dawes Heath. There is a bit of minor sporadic development along this site, but largely undeveloped. The application itself seeks outline consent for up to 455 new homes, a new multi-use community hall, land for the provision of a healthcare facility, land for a standalone early years and childcare nursery, new vehicular and pedestrian access points from Stadium Way in the north and Dawes Heath Road in the south, new greenways and green links, multifunctional open space, green infrastructure, surface water attenuation, landscaping and associated infrastructure. As I mentioned earlier, it's outlined, so the only thing for you to consider this evening is the principle of development and the accesses. Two vehicular accesses are proposed, if I nip back quickly, are proposed to the site. So one access is off of Stadium Way, located approximately here, opposite the Sainsbury's multi-storey car park. And then the other access is proposed down here on the southern side of the site, off of Dawes Heath Road itself. Some more detailed drawings of the accesses have been proposed. This is, it's difficult to tell because it's so zoomed in, but this is Stadium Way here, and you've got the Sainsbury's multi-storey car park and store here, and this is the proposed access here. And then on the other one, you've got the access off of Dawes Heath Road. The rest of the documents that were submitted with the application are indicative only, providing an indication of how the development might progress at reserve matters stage. So just to give people some context, I will quickly run through them, but a reminder, these are only indicative and not to be relied upon. So this is the proposed access route through the site. You've got this blue line which would show the main road leading through the site with the two access points. to the north and south of the site. There's been discussions, and it's proposed initially to put a bus gate in between so that only buses can travel between it and it would not become a through route. However, that is only indicative. You've then, moving on, the next plan shows more transport routes throughout the site. These are the non-vehicular access routes. So you've got the pink routes here, which are pedestrian access. You've got the purple routes, which are pedestrian and cycleways. And then you've got the main sort of access points to the site, showing that there's additional pedestrian accesses from the site from existing surrounding roads, in addition to the vehicular accesses. The next plan shows the proposed density and scale of development. So the lighter blue is what is proposed to be up to 2-storey development. The darker blue is what is proposed to be up to 3-storey development, with the green area being a combination of different types of open space within the site. The next plan is the open spaces plan. This covers a lot of different aspects of the site. These sort of beigey areas are the different areas of proposed development. You've got existing trees that are to be retained. You can see a lot of the existing historic hedgerows are proposed to be retained as well, with only small areas cut through to provide access to different parts of the site. You've also got a number of attenuation basins to address drainage concerns on the site, which would form part of a further submission in the future. A phasing plan has also been provided to show that, to begin with, it's intended that phase 1 would be developed over on this side of the site, which would be about 160 units, and sort of like health centre, village green, play areas, and then moving on to phase 2 over here, phase 3 here, and phase 4 here. So moving on, the application has received a number of public objections, with a total of 945 responses received from 809 different addresses objecting to the proposal for a range of reasons as set out in pages 60 to 61 of the report. 8 support comments were also received, highlighting the need for more affordable housing to provide homes for younger generations. A response from Rebecca Harris MP has also been received and is set out on pages 61 to 62 of the report. So that sort of sums up the introduction to it. I'll now turn to the consideration of the principle of the development. Planning law requires that applications be determined in accordance with the adopted local plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The adopted local plan identifies this site as Greenbelt. There are no safe policies within the local plan that seek to establish the general principles of development in the Greenbelt. So our starting point for considering the Greenbelt is within the National Planning Policy Framework. Officers have undertaken a comprehensive assessment of the site and how it serves the function of the Greenbelt. This is included in Appendix 1 to the report before you. This assessment has utilised the Council's new 6-stage approach to assessing applications for residential development in the Greenbelt. This assessment template was developed to provide a consistent, comprehensive, robust and up-to-date approach to assessing all primarily residential applications in the Greenbelt, where all the harm and all the benefits of a proposal are clearly set out, considered and given appropriate weight for consideration. As set out before you in the report, officers have concluded that the harm to the Greenbelt amounting from the impacts on the openness would be substantial, and that the Greenbelt purposes are set out in paragraph 138 of the NPPF. The harm to those would also be substantial. I would highlight that here that permitting the development would result in the coalescence of some parts of the development. So particularly along this stretch here, officers consider that this reduces the gap between Thundersley and Dawes Heath significantly to less than half its current width, to approximately 190 metres. The other harm resulting from the proposal has been set out in stage 4 of the Greenbelt assessment template, which identifies limited harm occurring to ecology and biodiversity, historic landscapes, wildlife, protected sites, increased traffic, noise and disturbance, pollution, flooding and oversubscribed services. The NPPF clearly states that inappropriate development within the Greenbelt should not be permitted unless very special circumstances exist. Because it doesn't meet any of the exceptions contained in paragraphs 149 and 150 of the NPPF, it is considered that it should not be approved except in very special circumstances. The applicants put forward a number of factors which they consider constitute individually and cumulatively very special circumstances. Those are set out for you in the report, but in summary, they are the withdrawn Castle Point plan evidence base, the 2018 Greenbelt Review, the local demand for market and affordable housing not being met by the current plan and adopted policy, the lack of 5-year housing land supply, and the provision of community facilities. The benefits of the proposal have clearly been discussed in the report and are set out in stage 5 of the assessment template in Appendix 1. The conclusion is that the provision of unmet housing need and affordable housing contribution has been given substantial weight in favour of this application. The community facilities and open space provision have been given moderate weight in favour of this application, whilst better non-vehicular transport links, the RAMS mitigation, retention of hedgerows, enhancement of biodiversity and contribution to local employment have all been given limited weight in favour of the application. In totality, however, considering these factors as a whole, it is not considered that either individually or cumulatively they outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt, particularly given the crucial function this land is considered to serve and provide towards the functions and strategic purpose. And I'll remind that the strategic purposes of the Greenbelt, which this site is considered to specifically serve, are to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, prevent neighbouring towns from merging into one another, safeguard the countryside from encroachment, and to assist in urban regeneration by encouraging the recycling of derelict and other urban land. In addition, it's, as I've mentioned before, it's considered to have substantial harm to the openness of the Greenbelt by replacing currently undeveloped greenfields with substantial urban built form. General advice later on in the report, moving on from Greenbelt matters, has been provided with explanations on planning policies that any future applications should seek to take into account. Details of the proposed accesses and the proposal have been consulted on with the Highways Authority. Subject to conditions, no objections have been raised to the proposed access to the site by the Highways Authority, and officers find no defensible reason to object to these accesses either. Just want to highlight at this juncture that paragraph 111 of the MPPF states that development should only be refused on highway grounds where there is a severe impact on the road network. So there has to be a severe impact. A comprehensive ecological assessment has been undertaken on the site, and a scheme of mitigation and remediation measures has been submitted by the applicant. These details have been carefully scrutinised by officers of the council, qualified ecologist and Natural England, who have raised no objections to the proposal subject to conditions. And again, officers find no defensible reason to object to the proposal on this basis, subject to conditions securing those mitigations. I would also point out that the applicant has proposed to provide a plan to achieve a minimum 10% biodiversity net gain on the site, which is not due to come into force until January. The site has also been identified as being located within the Benfleet and Southend Marshes, Blackwater Estuary and Foulness zones of influence for the Essex Coast Recreation Disturbance Avoidance and Mitigation Strategy. The developer has offered to pay an appropriate contribution to mitigating these, as set out in that document, and that would be secured by a Section 106 agreement. This is acceptable in these terms and no objection is raised here. Finally, just in conclusion, turning to the planning balance, the MPPF sets out a presumption in favour of sustainable development. However, the site is within the Greenbelt, which is listed as a protected area under footnote 7. The MPPF attaches substantial weight to the harm caused to the Greenbelt by any development, by reason of its inappropriateness and harm to the character, purpose and function. And it's considered that this application would conflict with that. Conversely, in support of the application, there's a significant shortfall of overall market and affordable housing supply in the borough, which the development would contribute towards. The development would also provide some economic benefit in terms of temporary construction jobs and other benefits as set out in stage 5 of the Greenbelt assessment. In undertaking this balancing exercise, despite the cumulative benefits of the proposal, which are substantial, it is not concluded that these considerations clearly and definitely outweigh the combined weight of the harm to the Greenbelt, and therefore it's not considered that these clearly outweigh the harm, and therefore very special circumstances do not exist to justify the development. And the MPPF provides a clear reason when that harm is identified to refusing development. The application before you is therefore recommended for refusal this evening, and I will hand back to you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We did have two speakers, one in opposition to the application and one in support, but we currently just have one speaker. It's Mr. Mike Carpenter. Would you like to make your statement, please, if you would like to step to the lectern? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. The application before you proposes up to 455 much-needed new homes, including 182 affordable houses and the other facilities mentioned by the planning officer. The 28-hectare site will also incorporate 14.3 hectares of multi-use open space and green links, so a little under 50% of the site will be open space and public access. I am a planning consultant, ladies and gentlemen, who assists developers and local authorities to identify suitable sites on which to provide homes where there is a recognised need. That need is for market housing and the full range of affordable housing tenures, including social rented, shared ownership and first homes. Having identified the need, we work again in partnership to identify suitable sites and then design appropriate developments to respect the existing landscape and environment and integrate communities. These proposals have been designed with the needs and aspirations of the community at their heart, offering opportunity to provide a complete range of well-designed homes to suit every lifestyle set within a sustainably located site with a focus on pedestrian and cycle modes of transport. We have worked positively with technical consultees during the determination of this application, all of whom have confirmed no objections to the proposals, subject to conditions and obligations. Whilst the scheme is located within the Greenbelt, we consider there are very special circumstances which support and justify the approval of this application. There is a defined need for new housing in the borough, a need for both market housing and affordable housing. Unfortunately, there has been a shortfall in the delivery of new homes in the borough for many years, which has had real-world implications for residents in Castle Point, not least a substantial rise in house prices, which now stand at more than 12 times the average annual wage. This has had impacts on levels of homelessness in the borough and has also led to many younger residents living at home with their parents much later in their adult years, unable to get their foot on the housing ladder. It has also meant that little funding has been available for the delivery of new community infrastructure. Respectfully, ladies and gentlemen, we feel that decisions on the location of new housing and community facilities cannot wait until the preparation of a new local plan in 2026 at the earliest. There is a genuine, sustained need for new homes in the borough which exists now. This site responds to that need and has been designed to create a vibrant new neighbourhood for the benefit of existing and future residents of the borough. So we therefore invite you to resolve to grant planning permission for this planning application this evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Councillor Knott, would you like to make your statement, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again for giving me this opportunity to speak on behalf of the residents in my ward, Victoria Ward. But I have to say I find it frustrating that this is the second time in so many months that I find myself standing here to speak out on behalf of residents against the development on our green belt. It seems to me that what appears to be a relentless attack on our green belt by developers is a result of them being encouraged and maybe emboldened by the previous administration's local plan that included large areas of green belt, including this very site. But fortunately, we've got a new independent council, and I hope that tonight you can follow the officer's recommendation and refuse the application. And there are very good reasons why you should refuse this application. Firstly, we've heard Obviously, this application is for development of 69 acres of greenbelt land. And the government, as we know, places great importance, apparently, on greenbelt. And as you've heard tonight from Mr. Garner, the government's national planning policy framework states on protected land, such as this development, it should only be allowed in very special circumstances, and only if the benefits outweigh the harm caused. Where are the special circumstances that outweigh the harm supporting this application? There are none. A development of this size would have a significant impact on the greenbelt and the wildlife supported by it. It would involve the closure of 13 main badger sets, loss of historic and ancient hedgerows. They can't just be regrown, they've gone. And we're all aware, aren't we, of another purpose of greenbelt is to prevent urban sprawl. Loss of this greenbelt would merge Dawes Heath with Thundersley, as we can see, to the west, and towards Rayleigh to the north, merging onto the industrial estate onto Rayleigh. Now, our council are progressing a new Castle Point plan, and this plan may well meet the needs for housing needs of the borough without destroying valuable spaces like this. And I would say it'd be completely premature if you were tonight to support this application when possibly the housing needs will be met by the new Castle Point plan. So this proposal, I would say, is in clear contravention of the government guidance contained in the National Planning Policy Framework. And if for no other reason, that is good grounds to actually refuse this application tonight. But members, there are other reasons. Members of the public, you've heard, have done over 800 objections. And it's only fair to them that I raise some of the other issues they brought up. And I'll be as quick as I can, Mr. Chairman. I know I'm on a time scale.
Thank you.
But pollution is a serious consideration. In 2013, a young girl in this country died from an acute asthma attack. And in 2020, the coroner made legal history in this country by including on her death certificate one of the causes of death, exposure to air pollution. And you may wonder why I'm sort of mentioning this when we're looking at an application here in Dawes Heath. I mention it because we all know, everybody here knows, the area and the roads all around this area already heavily congested, especially during the hours of rush hour. This development could bring in an extra 450, 800 vehicles, service vehicles, delivery vehicles, dust carts and so on. And that's important because the fact is, in this area, there is no continuous measuring of pollution. The pollution isn't continuously measured. The area sits right, as we've seen, right next to the 127 and the busy Rayleigh roundabout. But pollution testing is done occasionally. It's not done continuously. There's no continuous measure of pollution. And also, it's only tested for NO2 emissions. There is no testing whatsoever for the pollutant PM2.5, which is in car emissions, and that is a particular pollutant that gets right deep in the lungs. And I would say it would be reckless, in my view, if tonight you were to approve this application when you have before you no record or evidential data of the existing continuous NO2 levels around this site. You've got absolutely no record whatsoever of PM2.5 because it's just not measured. And you've got no scientific data, no information in front of you tonight to inform you what impact this development would have on pollution, what impact an extra 450, 900 vehicles would have. And it's the case of the young girl that I mentioned shows this is literally could be a matter of life and death, and you do need that information, and it's just not there. Infrastructure is another issue that is raised. This development, quite realistically, would produce an extra 1,000 residents into this area. The NHS states that GP services in the area do not have capacity to accommodate this extra growth. There is already a deficit in the area of primary health care facilities. This is a matter of fact. It's not anecdotal evidence. This is what the NHS, the government, actually states. There is a deficit already, and it can't cope with this site. And also, I would mention about a month or so ago in the Sunday Times, there is reports that actually mentioned that Southend Hospital, which is the hospital that would primarily deal with this development, has the longest waiting list. It has the longest waiting times in the whole country. Not Essex, the whole country. And we're proposing an extra 1,000 houses. And realistically, any contribution, we know we'll hear from the developers, they will give a contribution towards healthcare facilities. But realistically, any contribution that a developer will make in this development, in my view anyway, can never be sufficient to maintain and run an adequate primary healthcare service for 1,000 people over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. We're not talking about just a year. We're talking, this is going to be here almost forever. That's any healthcare facilities that's got to be funded. I'm coming to the end, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, roads are another issue. I won't go too much into that. We all know how busy those roads are, and any mitigation of cycle paths, which there's no room on the main roads anyway for, will never, in my view, mitigate an extra up to 900 vehicles on those roads, which are already gridlocked. And Mr. Chairman, I do come to you, and I'm grateful that you've given me time. But I would ask you members now to listen to the over 800 objections that these people have put in for you to look at. I'd ask you to listen to those. I'd ask you to pay attention to the people that have turned out tonight on a cold December night. They feel so strongly about this. Please take into account their views. I'd ask you to listen to the planning officers, and I thank them for the work they've done. When I was reading through the report, it's immense amount of work they've done. I thank you for it, and I thank you for the recommendation that this is refused tonight. But I'll ask you also, I'd ask you to listen to your conscience, that inner voice that surely must tell you that this application should not be supported. And I really would ask you to unanimously refuse the application and just consign it to history. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Before I move the recommendation, do members have any questions for the planning officer about the planning application? Please note this is the members' opportunity to seek clarification from the planning officer on any matters that they are unclear of regarding this application. Members should refrain from making statements about their views on the proposal. These should be expressed in the debate section of the meeting. Are there any questions? Councillor Thornton.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for our officer here, Stephen Garner, if I may. One of the statements that you said was that the highways would only really intervene if there was a severe issue in highways. If over 500,000 vehicles coming onto that area between Woodman Arms and Rayleigh Weir, which already gets blocked up quite a lot now, as I know, does not constitute severe, what does it mean? Because it's a very subjective term, severe. Could you explain what severe actually means, please?
Of course, I can try and give you the best explanation. I am not a highways expert, so we defer to the Highways Authority on those matters. However, transport monitoring and assessments have been undertaken during peak rush hour, morning and evening, during the course of the week over a number of weeks. And that information has been fed into modelling that both the applicant and the Highways Authority have done. I can't say that an additional, I know it's been mentioned that there's potentially 1,000 more cars being generated by the developer, or 900 cars. I can't say that if it was 950, that tips it over the edge. It's, as you say, it's a subjective matter. However, the Highways Authority have come back and said that they have, subject to the conditions set out in the report, they have no objection to it, and that they do not consider it to be a severe impact.
Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a number of questions that I wish to ask tonight, but
Could I just say, if you could ask a couple, we'll try and get round the table again on those. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Page 55 refers mitigation in the form of sustainable transport improvements is also to be secured to offer alternative forms of transport from the development to connect into cycle and walking network, and also improvements to the bus service facilities and services in the vicinity of the site. It appears an unrealistic hope that the occupants of this huge housing estate will leave their cars on their drives and will start using their feet, cycle and buses to commute to work and go about their business.
Councillor Lewis, sorry, could I ask you to get to the question, if you may?
My question is now, is this mitigation adequate for the vast increase in car traffic that will be generated from such a huge development? Thank you.
Thank you. So one of the key aims of the NPPF is to encourage sustainable transport. If it wasn't there, if these proposals, the cycle, the footpaths weren't there, then it would not be encouraging it. Of course, we cannot enforce that people use those alternative transport measures. However, by having them there, it provides the opportunity for use, even if those occupants choose not to use it. I agree with the assessment by the Highways Authority that it's a benefit of the proposal to have those additions, and it's better off having them than not having them at all in the development. So I think that, yes, basically it's better having them there. We cannot enforce that people use it, but it's better than not having it at all.
Yes, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Page 75 refers, given the very strong objections made by the Essex Badger Protection Group, why wasn't more made of this within Section 7 of the evaluation of proposal? It would seem to me that the Council are happy to accept the view of some so-called experts, but not those of others. Thank you.
So the comments of the Essex Badger Protection Group have been taken on board. It's acknowledged that there are a large number of sets and there is a large badger population on that site. However, the applicant has had their own ecology report provided, and we have had that independently assessed. So we're not just taking the applicant's word for it. This has been independently assessed by a qualified ecologist, as well as Natural England, who are responsible for issuing badger licences and approving any works to badgers. And they have raised no objection to the proposal. There are mitigation measures proposed and strategies which can be secured by condition, and subject to those, there's been no objection raised. So given that they are, Natural England is the sort of governing body on badgers, they are legally responsible. Seeing as they have not objected to it, officers do not consider that we would be in a defensible or sustainable position to object to it either.
Councillor Savage.
I'd just like to go back to even the applicant mentioned the need in the borough for affordable housing, the fact that we have got a minimal amount of land supply. But I'd also like to refer back a month or so when Victoria Ward Councillor Gibson stood in this very chamber and stated the evidence that we've now received to suggest that we need less than 100 houses than
Councillor Savage, could I ask you to go to a question? We have a debate section, obviously.
Okay. I'll come back to you then. Thank you.
Councillor Thornton.
Thank you. Am I correct in saying that Dr. Annie Gordon from the Essex Wildlife Trust did put in an objection to the application?
Bear with me. from reading the final paragraph, I wouldn't say it's conclusive that they've objected to it. They've asked for reconsideration about whether the land is allocated. However, this isn't a question of allocate. Oh, sorry. Yes, so it seems that they have concerns with the proposal. However, I'll admit, given the information that's been provided and assessed by the independent ecologist with the regards to both habitats and wildlife, we just don't think that there's whilst they make very good points, we think that the proposal put forward by the applicant is sufficient to overcome these concerns.
Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Page 61, and this is with reference to the comment by our local MP, Rebecca Harris, and there's two parts to it. Has the developer accurately determined the level of SUDS infrastructure needed for the site to ensure that any outflows into the existing drainage network will not exacerbate flood risk for existing properties? And the second part, if I may, have the flood risk management strategy and surface water management plan, including hydraulic modelling, been reviewed and updated with a particular focus on increasing risk due to climate change? Thank you.
So these have not been done as part of this application. However, as you'll notice from the consultee section, the lead local flood authority at Essex County Council recommend a number of conditions. Some of these conditions, or the majority of them, as their name suggests, relates to the possibility and potential of the site to flood. And so one of those is the submission of an appropriately detailed scheme for sustainable drainage across the entire site. As I showed you earlier on the indicative plans, there's a number of drainage basins, swales, and natural drainage features. More details would be provided as if it were to be approved. A condition would require the submission of more details to address those concerns, but they would come at a later stage and haven't been submitted as part of this.
Councillor Savage and then Councillor Thornton.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the supply of facilities that was mentioned earlier in terms of the healthcare facilities and the childcare facilities. Is anything actually being allocated, or is it just purely a little bit of land that's been left aside for these facilities?
So under this proposal, it's proposed to allocate the land and provide the land for those facilities to be constructed.
Councillor Thornton.
Just picking up on your other comments previously about the flooding, does it take any flooding mitigation that's considered here? Does it take into consideration the surrounding area that's already got some flooding issues already? In terms of fact, I know that there's been times when underneath the Rayleigh Weir roundabout that there's been a lot of water accumulating there. Eventually, the water has to leave that area, in which case it has to go into the surrounding areas process of dealing with that. Unless we want to actually have a real weir at Rayleigh Weir, how are we going to get around that?
Yes, I take your point. So with any drainage strategy, we cannot require a development to fix existing issues. That is not a requirement that can be put on an applicant or a developer. It's overly onerous, and we would, if a condition required that, we would be in a position where they would be able to challenge it, and we would likely be unsuccessful in a challenge. However, what the MPPF drainage guidance and all of that covers is that what you can do is ensure that there is no additional harm resulting from the development. So, copy one of my colleagues' phrases, it wipes its own face. It ensures that whatever the problem is now does not get made worse. It may have the added benefit that it might make things better, but we can't require it to make things better. Insofar as making sure, completely acknowledge water flows downhill, it has to leave at some point, it can't just stay within the confines of the site. That's where sustainable drainage systems come into play, and you have attenuated storage systems where these drainage basins, for instance. I don't know the scheme because it's not been submitted yet. However, they can have things such as hydro breaks, sluices on them that only allow the water to exit at a controlled lower flow rate when there is capacity within the system. So if there's an initial peak storm, it would only allow the water to leave once the peak has started to drop off. But as I say, that would form part of a later submission as part of the wider drainage scheme.
Thank you.
Councillor Lillis, then Councillor Jackie Thornton.
Thank you, Chair. And this follows on from what Councillor Savage has just raised. Page 48 refers, NHS England expressed several concerns that the area of the proposed development is already below recognised standards of provision for the existing population, us. It notes that the land has been allocated for a new health facility, but states that the size of the built facility is not stated. It requests the sum of £225,000 to be secured via a Section 106 agreement. And my question, I've finally got to that, what will this money be spent on? Who will pay for the construction of the new health facility and for the doctors, nurses, support staff that are required to run it? Given the shortage of trained medical staff, where will the staff come from for this facility? Thank you.
So what the NHS spend the money on, they have to spend it because it's been a contribution from a develop. If it goes ahead, contribution by the development, it has to be spent on the provision of services within the area. I can't, off the top of my head, I don't know the specific radius, but it has to serve a certain function within that area. So far as the provision of the facility, it could be the NHS builds a new healthcare facility there. Alternatively, it could be another private provider who would be sought to fund and construct, say, a doctor's surgery or a small health facility. The same is true with the childcare facility, the land that's allocated for that. As I say, the NHS, it's their guidance. They've set out amongst their own guidelines that contribution is required, and if that contribution is required, that they have no objection to the proposal. So yes, it would. I don't know specifically how that would be spent by the NHS, but subject to that, the NHS have raised no objection to it.
Councillor Jackie Thornton.
Thank you. The link road, is that now not restricted to just buses, or is it restricted to just buses? Okay.
So it's only indicative, that part. The only parts of this application are the principle of the whole development, which is the amount of houses, the additional facilities they're providing, and the two accesses, the one off of Stadium Way and the one off of Dawes Heath Road. There has been discussions in the past and as part of this application about providing a bus gate in the middle so that it's not a through road, and also the discussion about whether that also allows emergency services through as well. That's only indicative. That would form the actual sort of hard facts, and how it would be arranged and how it would actually be carried out would be dealt with at a later stage under reserved matters.
Councillor Savage, did you wish to speak?
When we excuse me, when we went to the site for the visit, you mentioned the bus gate, Stephen, but I do believe you stated that the bus companies hadn't actually been contacted with regard to whether they would even run a bus through that area. Is that still the case?
I'm not aware of the bus companies. It may be that the applicant has, but certainly at this time I'm not personally aware, but they could at a later date.
Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Last one for me. Page 59 refers, given the size of the development and the impact on the local infrastructure, are you concerned, Steve, that there are no responses or comments received from the following: Essex and Suffolk Water, Environment Agency, Public Right of Way, Anglian Water, Castle Point Borough Council's Public Open Space Operational Manager, Cadent Gas, Castle Point Wildlife Group, East of England Ambulance Service, and finally, UK Power Networks. Thank you very much.
Page 59.
Yes. Yep.
Not a problem. So I'm not concerned about there being no responses from those consultees. Typically, if a consultee doesn't make a comment, it means that they're not objecting to the proposal. They do not have a concern with it. Picking up a couple of those specific consultee responses, people such as Essex and Suffolk Water and Anglian Water have a public duty to provide services for the amount of dwellings within an area. That's set by government, so they would have to provide the capacity within the system. The Environment Agency, this site is only in flood zone 1, which is pretty much everywhere. It's a low risk of flooding, so the Environment Agency wouldn't be concerned about flooding in that respect. And indeed, as we've already discussed, the lead local flood authority have raised no issue on that. Public rights of way team, it's not impacting directly on a public right of way. In fact, it will probably end up creating some more. And then people such as Cadent Gas and UK Power Networks, I'm not concerned about those either. They're similar to the water companies. They will provide the capacity for the new dwellings. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, members? Okay, the Planning Officer's recommendation is that planning permission be refused for the reasons set out in the report. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Please note that members should only speak once during the debate section of the meeting. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Jackie Thornton.
I haven't seen anything or heard anything here tonight that convinces me that the harms to the Greenbelt have been outweighed, and for that reason I can't support the application.
Thank you. Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you to Steve for answering all of my questions tonight and some others that I've been sending to you over the last few days. Thanks also to Councillor John Knott, who spoke with great conviction and eloquence, if I may say that. And something that I've learned very early on in my role of councillor is when Councillor John Knott speaks, you do well to listen. And I hope that the council was listening and will take note of some of the issues that he raised tonight, not least air pollution, which is, dare I say, a silent killer. As Councillor Savage has said, on Monday, some of us attended the site visit, Dawes Heath, obviously, and it's fair to say that nothing quite prepares you for the sheer size, the vastness of this proposed development site. And I'm not ashamed to say that I actually felt quite emotional standing there, looking out at the beautiful countryside, the hedgerows, the agricultural land. The site, I believe, is 68.92 acres. And even on that map, I think that's quite a difficult number to get your head round. But I understand that it equates broadly to about 40 Wembley-sized football pitches. It's a vast area. There are just 2 proposed vehicular access ways to the site, from the north via Stadium Way and Rayleigh Road, and from the south via Dawes Heath Road. We've heard tonight that Essex County Council highways don't express severe concerns. I think that anyone who lives in the area will know it's absolute madness to suggest that the current infrastructure, despite those little tweaks that they've proposed, will be able to cope with the increase in traffic. Personally, I am filled with dread whenever I have to face the prospect of driving over the Woodman's roundabout, from Benfleet that is, or down to Stadium Way, or Rayleigh Weir, or indeed into Rayleigh. because I know I'm going to be sitting in traffic for pretty much most of half an hour or so, maybe more. Essex Wildlife Trust have stated that the development poses a risk of harm to a number of protected species. NHS England, as we heard from Councillor Knott, as indeed I raised in my question, have stated that the GP practices do not have the capacity for the additional growth resulting from this development. And indeed, they can't provide the recognised standards of provision as it is for the existing population. Again, us. The Badger Protection Group state that they strongly object to the application and remind us all that badgers are protected by UK law. They urge planners to refuse planning permission to allow development on this site. Our MP, Rebecca Harris, comments, the application constitutes inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. And I'm going to repeat that. The application constitutes inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. She objects on the grounds of the potential for the proposed development to cause flooding for other properties outside the site. She also objects on the grounds that the development will place unacceptable stress on the local highway network. And finally, when looking through the report today, looking for a choice phrase, on page 6, it says the site forms part of an important wildlife corridor which runs into the urban area and is part of the historical Dawes Heath woodlands, which span from Headley Great Wood in the east. The proposal is recommended by officers for refusal, and I support that recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chairman. The government is coming back to local authorities and making things more and more difficult to turn down planning applications. They're actually recommending increasing density of housing in areas. So all the areas, Benfleet, Hadley, Canvey Island, the government's recommending increasing the density. Now this is a load of nonsense, it really is. What future does this give our children living in an area like this? The traffic, as everybody knows here, is absolutely horrendous. And I'm just amazed that the highways authorities are saying they don't have a problem with it. They just want to look at Rayleigh, they want to look at the Woodman's Arms, the 127, Canvey Way. We just go on and on and on. There is no more room for housing in this area. And as you know, I've been pleading for new towns to be built east of Essex. Stop letting the builders shove everything into this area. We've been mentioned about pollution. This gives no future for us or for our children, and this is just absolutely not acceptable, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thornton.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it short and sweet. I appreciate we do, as having a daughter who's looking for a house at the moment and not finding anything in the area that's affordable, I appreciate we do need new housing. However, there is no special circumstances here. This is Greenbelt and it should stay Greenbelt, and that's the end of that. The infrastructure is not able to accept what we've got from a flooding or from a from a transport perspective. And I'm sorry, I just can't believe that no response means equal, that they immediately agree to it. I just can't accept that. If people are not responding...
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If you could just let the councillor finish. Thank you.
If people are not responding, that it's a case of least said, soonest mended, rather than we accept it and we're just going to shut up and say nothing. I'm sorry, I can't accept that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor. Yes, Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have to say that I've sat and listened to everything that's gone on here tonight, and I cannot add anything further other than to say I fully support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Savage.
Yeah, apologies for my earlier little rant with respect to the need, but I do think that we need to digest that a little bit. You know, when we look at this bit of land here and we talk about, and I think Councillor Thornton, Andrew Thornton is right, there is a need for affordable housing in this borough, definitely. My daughter's in exactly the same position, has had to buy out of the borough. Ultimately, though, we have proved, as part of the development of the new plan, that our numbers are much less than what they were forecast previously. And ultimately, the real need for that land is to keep that as a farming piece of land, is to keep that for horses roaming around there. You know, it was lovely to drive down that little lane towards that fishery, wasn't it, and see all the horses in the fields around there. And that's the purpose of that land. I shared with Councillor Lewis a story where I was pulled up outside Rugwood the day that my father took a heart attack. He didn't die, by the way, but it actually took me 40 minutes to actually turn around in Dawes Road and get beyond Rayleigh Weir to get to Langdon. 40 minutes to get down Dawes Road and up the A129 to Rayleigh Weir. And you know, an Essex highway say there isn't a problem with that junction. Absolutely ridiculous. So I fully support the officer's recommendation as well.
Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Howlett.
Although we're getting offered, or the council are getting offered land to put doctor's surgery up, it doesn't guarantee there's any doctors to put in it. As Russ said, the horses, all we keep getting around here is people building on stables and yards, which is taking away all the recreation, mental health for all the horse riders associated with it. Access, as everyone said, it's a joke. The lights at Stadium Way is already backed up at peak times. You'll never get out. And that'll just bring the pollution higher and higher. So, again, thanks to the planning department for their substantial pack for us to read through. But I, again, won't be accepting this development.
Thank you, Councillor Howlett. Would anyone else like to speak? Members, the motion before you is for refusal. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion. That is unanimous. The motion is carried and the application is refused for the reasons stated. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. There is one more piece of business tonight, but should any of you feel that you wish to leave now would be an appropriate time to do so. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, Councillor.
Chair, as a point of clarification, on the grounds that I have been here for the previous meetings, even though I was not sitting on the board, and as I am representing Councillor Skipp, do I have the right to converse on this?
You wouldn't know because you didn't sit on the original meeting. There will be a number of exclusions. Actually, you're one of 3 people that will not be on.
Even though I was here at the original meeting.
You were at the meeting, but you weren't sitting in as a committee member.
Correct.
Yep.
So I cannot put the claims of what Skipp wanted. Councillor Skipp
No,
wanted.
no, it wouldn't apply in this particular instance because it's been deferred twice. So the meeting is effectively still live. So it would only be those councillors that started the meeting, and you're one of 3 that won't be taking any part in this. Just to reiterate on that one, this is a twice deferred meeting, so it's effectively still live, and there will be 3 councillors that will be excluded from taking part in this meeting or voting, and that would be, they weren't present on the day as committee members. It would be Councillor Gregg, Councillor Howlett, and Councillor Andrew Thornton. But we are quorate, so we can proceed. Item 2 is Benfleet Service Station, 175 to 179 Kiln Road. I will now hand over to the Planning Officer to present this item.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully you'll remember it. It was only last week we were here discussing it. But as the Chairman's already mentioned, this application was deferred twice, once on the 3rd of October and once on the 5th of December. The Chairman has agreed that this item can be brought forward this evening as a matter of urgent business in order to that the application can be determined and avoid an appeal for non-determination. As you all know, permission is sought to remove the mechanical car wash and install 6 electric vehicle charging points, as well as some jet wash bays, a new electrical substation and plant room for the jet wash. At the last meeting, a motion was put forward to defer this application in order to undertake consultation with Essex County Council Trading Standards as the Petroleum Enforcement Authority, and also to make a further attempt to get a response from UK Power Networks. Trading Standards as the Petroleum Enforcement Authority have responded, and their response is before you in the report, but I will read it out, that the installation of an electric vehicle charging point as part of a licensed petroleum site is commonplace. In general terms, there is no legal requirement for the site to inform us of the installation of electric charging points, although it is incumbent on the site owner and contractors to ensure that the installation does not cause the site as a whole to move outside the requirements of the Blue Book in all aspects that impact the petroleum site. The plans, which are of course not in sufficient detail to show all aspects of the installation, identify the hazard areas and reference compliance with the Blue Book, and in general the specialist designers and contractors will be well conversant with the requirements of the Blue Book. There is no requirement to presume non-compliance with the requirements of the Blue Book based on the information received. We still have no response received from UK Power Networks. However, I stand by what I've said in the previous committee, that they are proposing to add an additional substation to the existing network and won't be relying on existing substations for the capacity required. And I don't consider that a lack of response from UK Power Networks in this instance represents a sustainable or reasonable justification to not take a decision on the application this evening. None of the additional information changes my recommendation before you this evening, and I maintain my point that the application should be approved, and that recommendation is set out before you in the agenda this evening. So thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Stephen. Before I move the recommendation, do members have any questions for the Planning Officer about the further information provided this evening, given the fact that we are in meeting number 3? Councillor Savage.
I won't lie to you, I'm disappointed with that. But nonetheless, that's what the experts are saying. So, as I said in the last meeting, I'd shut up. However, can I ask, Stephen, if it would be prudent to put, or possible to put in a condition on this application with respect to appear section 4.1, where it states in there that the applicant shouldn't be leaving the station closed with no one there while those chargers are live. Is that something that's possible, such that those chargers are only accessible when the station is open?
We are not the experts in this matter. I don't think that because it's covered under separate rules and regulations, not under the planning system, it's unreasonable duplication of legislation. If the legislation says that it shouldn't be open, then that's what the legislation says. It's not for us to duplicate that. So I don't feel it would be reasonable for us to put condition on.
Councillor Jackie Thornton.
Can I ask, since the last meeting, have we actually made another application to UK Power Networks?
Yes, we have requested a further response, but none has been forthcoming.
Are there any other questions? The planning officer's recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to conditions as set out in the report. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Anderson.
Chairman, we have listened very carefully to the planning officer's opinions as to how this setup should work. And I feel that I should accept his investigations, but I certainly would like, now whether it's done or not, I don't know, but I'm saying it in public. I want it noted at this meeting that I am concerned about that design and that type of facility. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this is the third time this has come before us. And just to pick up on Councillor Anderson's point, I think we all would like it noted that we have concerns about this. And I still have those concerns. Thank you.
Councillor Jackie Thornton.
Again, I'd like to say I still have concerns. When we looked at those diagrams, there was something mentioned at the previous meeting about the car, where the car is parked, and that wasn't taken into account into the zones. I don't think we've had enough time to have the responses back and consider them and look to see whether there was any further questions. So I'm very, very uncomfortable. I'm not sure that I can support it. Thank you.
Councillor Savage.
Just a point of clarification, really, as was mentioned previously, that we had the planning support team, the LGA here for a training session last week, planning advisory service, and they said leave the expert decisions to the experts, and unfortunately the experts are coming back and saying that that's perfectly adequate, and ultimately, as I said, we would be between a rock and a hard place if we keep on knocking back stuff that has been voted for approval. So, unfortunately, whilst it goes against the grain, that's the position we find ourselves in. I fully understand and accept and agree with everything that John and Rob have said. It's just where we are, unfortunately.
Would anyone else like to speak? I would like to just say one thing, which is probably unusual. We are in danger, obviously, of non-determination, so we really need to make a decision tonight, and it needs to be based upon sound planning reasons. Whilst we might disagree or have reservations with elements of the law, we are here to base that upon the law as it exists now. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands? Those for the motion. Those against the motion. And any abstentions?
Chairman's voting was 14 for the recommendations. There was 2 against and there's 1 abstention. And that adds up to 7. That was the number of members who were able to vote.
Yes. The motion is therefore carried and the application is granted subject to conditions. That concludes the business for this meeting. Thank you very much for attending and good evening.